On this episode of Locked On Canadiens, it's a crossover with our friends at Locked On Blue Jackets. We analyze the Patrik Laine trade. We talk about what the Canadiens are getting in Patrik Laine and what the Columbus Blue Jackets are getting in Jordan Harris.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am joined by some friends today, which you may notice. I've got Laura Saba and Ian Boisvert of Locked On Canadiens, and we're going to talk a little bit about Patrik Laine. We're going to talk a little bit about Jordan Harris. We're going to talk about the trade as a whole, and it feels like really good timing because I think it was about this time last week that we did a preliminary, hey, what if they trade Patrik Laine to the Habs episode? So clearly we were onto something. Before we get into it, I just want to remind everyone that we are sponsored today by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. So mixed reactions to this trade, I think, from both sides. Quite frankly, I'm seeing a lot of Columbus fans rejoicing in the streets. I'm seeing a lot of Columbus fans making like Guy Fawkes dolls of Don Waddell. I'm seeing similar things happening in Montreal, kind of less. I think more people think that the Montreal Canadiens kind of made out like bandits in this trade, which I don't agree with, but don't necessarily disagree with. So I guess let's start there. How are we feeling about this trade? I know that Ian is so psyched, but Laura, let's start with you. How are you feeling about the trade now that it's finally happened?
I was a little bit apprehensive when we first talked about this a couple of weeks ago, Jay, just simply because a lot of times a player like Laine gets chewed up and spit out in this market. And there's no sugarcoating that, right? And a lot of times people blame the Habs fans because we are admittedly unhinged in a lot of ways. But sometimes it is truly the media that runs a player out of town, right? So I think, the thing that I noticed from the press conferences of Kent Hughes and Laine yesterday was that doesn't necessarily seem like it's going to be the issue in Montreal, because I think from what you've said and from what we've learned about Patrik Laine, he's very much the person that runs his own show. He was the one that took the reins and said, I'm not doing well. I'm not playing well. I'm not at my best at my job. I need to go do something about this, right? Like he was the catalyst for that. He was the one who drove it. It's not like someone told him, you need to get out of here. You need a change of scenery. And he was the one who came to that realization, as we talked about. He talked about how much he loved Columbus when he first arrived. He really felt embraced by the fans. He felt that they were really passionate. And he talked about that as well in his press conference. So I think that there's a lot often made out, especially for players who are honest about their mental health issues, who do come forward and who do talk about this. Unfortunately, people often single those out as people who might not be able to handle the kind of pressure there is in Montreal. Kent Hughes said, in fact, I feel like he's looking for a market that's like this. And he said himself multiple times he was excited to be back in a Canadian market for that reason. Habs fans are crazy. He gets it. And I think that a lot of times, like that attitude that he's not going to do well here because of what he's been through is extremely, extremely ableist. And I think we really, really kind of need to dismantle that. I think he comes in with a fresh start, a healthy mindset. We saw him working out with the NFL players. There's a lot of positivity associated with this. So for me, I think, I had to also check myself and be like, what am I really worried about with Patrik Laine? And I think the return was ridiculous. Like the Canadiens got a 2nd-round pick. And I do think, it's not necessarily true that the Montreal Canadiens fleeced the Columbus Blue Jackets, because they really needed to get away from that cap hit. And they were the only ones who were willing to take the cap, like the entire cap hit without any retention. So I think that it is a win for Columbus. And it's not like they got some schlub, right? It's definitely like, I feel like Montreal got better value in terms of the players and the picks associated with this trade, or the pick that's associated with this trade. But it's not like they got some guy. They got a player who in a great environment could be an extremely effective second pairing defenseman. And that's the kind of guy that you need to win games, right? You need that depth. So I think it's win-win for everybody. I've just been rambling so much. I don't know. Like, I feel so passionately about this now. Apparently, I'm as excited as Ian.
Yeah, no, we all have a lot of feelings about this trade, I think, for a variety of reasons. Obviously, you mentioned Jordan Harris there. And I know basically as soon as it happened, Laura texted me and was like, please look after my small son. And everyone kind of, the comments have been flooding in. I talked about it in yesterday's episode, you know, to a man or to a person, every single Habs fan has come and been like, you are going to love this guy. He is great. He's not flashy, but he does everything right. We'll talk a little bit about kind of Harris as a player later on. But that cap hit is kind of what I wanted to touch on a little bit here. And that to me, I think is what a lot of people are either pretending to not know or are choosing to ignore or whatever. The way I look at this trade is it is Laine for Harris, and it is a second-round pick for no retention. Is kind of how they paid us
extremely fair
to not have to carry any of that cap hit. So with that kind of in mind, Ian, how do you feel about the return and kind of the trade as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely understand the need for cap space in this league. Cap space is king, right? Like if you don't have it, you want it. That's just kind of the economy of cap space across the NHL. There's not a lot of teams who, number one, could have taken on all of Patrik Laine's cap hit, or two, were willing to take on Patrik Laine's cap hit. According to Aaron Portzline, Montreal was the only team who said, we'll take the whole thing. My question is now for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Okay, cool. You save almost $9 million in cap space for the next 2 years. What are you going to do with it? Because they're not, look, I mean, Montreal and Columbus the last 2 years have been right next to each other in the standings, right? It's sort of a situation where, if it's just the case of an owner who wants to try to cut some salaries so he can, they don't pay as much to the players, or does Waddell actually have a plan of like, okay, this is what we want to do with this money? Like, I'm genuinely curious, because when we did this last time, I asked, what does Waddell want to do the most out of this trade? Does he want to maximize the return in terms of assets, or does he want to minimize the amount of money that he has to pay Patrik Laine? It's very clear it was the latter. So what do you think he's got planned with that money?
I don't think it's necessarily, and I kind of came to this realization earlier today, after recording yesterday's episode, before recording this episode. Luckily, I was kind of mulling it over in terms of cap space, and like you said, cap space is king. It's what you do with it. I don't necessarily know that he wants to do something with all of this cap space they have. What I do think this is it gives them flexibility in terms of, the conversation in Columbus for it feels like the last 75 years has been, man, Els Merzlikins makes too much money. Zach Werenski makes too much money. Johnny Gaudreau is making too much money. And now you add Sean Monahan into this. Sean Monahan is making too much money. All of those deals, I think, look much better now when you realize just how much cap they have. And I don't know whether, it's not out of the realm of possibility that they're looking to take on a bad contract for assets. I think maybe it was either Portzline or Brian Hedger mentioned after the trade. Two teams immediately called Don Waddell after the trade, like, hey, we hear you've got lots of cap space. We want some of that. So, is it going to be a case of, are they going to do the Coyotes thing of trade for someone who is, legally dead and get a first round pick as well? And then they sit there and, no player is really coming. Like, I guess Carey Price is a player that kind of comes to mind. Obviously, the Habs are not going to trade Carey Price. He is, that cap hit is staying there until it's done. But it could be a situation like that where a team that needs some cap space and has a player that is, kind of has that. If I say bloated contract, this is not a dig at Carey Price, but $10.5 million is a lot of dollars for a player who's not playing and probably will never play again.
Understatement of the century. Yeah.
Right. I'm just like preempting that so I don't have Habs fans flooding my comments by saying, how dare you, Carey Price is worth every cent of that 10.5 million. I agree. But he's not using it right now. So I wonder if it's a case of they take on a contract like that, get a first round pick or something else out of the deal, and then when that player's contract is up at the end of this season, that cap space comes right back. They don't have a ton to do next off season unless, I know Jordan Harris is now going to be something to think about next season. I believe Dmitry Voronkov's ELC finishes next season. And then the season after that, Adam Fantilli is going to need a new contract. He's coming off his ELC, so it feels like he's setting up for the future in terms of, we're not going to use that cap space right now. He might surprise me. He might turn around tomorrow and trade for whoever has a big like Leon Draisaitl. He might turn around and trade for him tomorrow.
No, he's coming to Montreal.
He's going to San Jose, but that's a discussion for another time. Or they turn around and they trade for Mitch Marner. A player like that.
Ooh, I like that.
I love that.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot.
Or Jonathan Huberdeau.
Mitch Marner would throw himself into the Ohio River if he got traded to Columbus. Jonathan Huberdeau would also probably do the same. But kind of where I'm at is that I see a lot of people being like, well, now he's got to do something this offseason with that cap space. And he kind of doesn't. No. And also another point, and kind of I'll move on in a second here because we're running a little long on this segment. But the Blue Jackets are not a team that's going to challenge for the cup next season unless a lot of things go very, very right, And I don't think a team that is JD Young of Locked On Sharks always calls it like the creamy middle, of the ideal for the Blue Jackets is drafting somewhere between 10 and 15 overall this season. Mm-hmm. That's a team that doesn't need to spend to the cap. I think there's this weird thought in the NHL that every single team has to spend what's the cap this season? 88.5, 88.
I think it's 88.
Every team has to spend $87 million this season. And that's simply not true. So would love for them to find a way to weaponize this cap space. But if they start the season with it, I'm not going to be sitting here being like, man, all of that money that we're not using, blah, 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 which I think is kind of again, that's been a common refrain from Blue Jackets fans is, why do we have all this cap space if we're not going to use it? So I like the trade.
2 words for them. Marc Bergevin. Yeah. Tell those Blue Jackets fans that are asking that question, Marc Bergevin. Just say those 2 words. Yeah,
sometimes cap space it's there, and honestly, I've been there. Sometimes I spend money just to spend money. If I'm at the store and I've already spent like $15 on cream cheese, because that's how much cream cheese costs these days, I'm probably going to get 2 blocks because why not? I think a lot of people think that some GM spend money just to spend money, and I don't know that Don Waddell is that kind of player, is that kind of GM, excuse me. But just kind of to round off that for my 2 cents on the trade, I guess. I like it. I talked yesterday about how trades don't exist in a vacuum. In a vacuum, this trade doesn't look great because it's a potential 40-goal scorer being traded for a third pairing defenseman on the surface. But I think a lot of people are looking at this trade as Laine is obviously going to hit his ceiling and his full potential and score 50 goals on the Canadiens, whereas Harris is going to be a 6th defenseman on the Blue Jackets. And what's more likely is that they both kind of come out somewhere in the middle. And we'll talk about both players and kind of what they can achieve in the second and third segments. But it feels very optimistic for Habs fans and very pessimistic for Blue Jackets fans, which I don't necessarily blame them for. We've had a lot of optimism that is immediately thrown in our faces by this dumb team that we all love, but it's not that big of a deal. The trade is fine. I'm not out here dancing in the streets and erecting a statue to Don Waddell. The trade is fine. But I know that you guys want to talk a little bit about where Laine is going to fit in on the Habs, and I thought I would give you guys kind of a quick scouting report. Obviously, you know him for his goal scoring, but what else does Laine bring to the team? We're going to talk about that in just a second on this special crossover edition of Locked On Blue Jackets and Locked On Canadiens. First, I've got to tell you guys all about Indeed, because we're all driven by the search for better. When it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. They are your matching and hiring platform. They've got over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. So you can ditch all of the busy work, all of the using a million different things to do a million different things. You can do everything in Indeed. You can do scheduling, screening, and messaging. So you can connect with those ideal candidates faster. And it's not just faster with Indeed. 93% of employers agree that they deliver the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent survey. In the minute that I've been talking to you, 23 hires have been made on Indeed, according to their data, and they have over 350 million monthly unique visitors globally and an extended reach through Glassdoor. So join one of the 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast, and listeners of this show are going to get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. You need Indeed. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets and Locked On Canadiens. We've talked a little bit about the trade. Now let's talk about what Patrik Laine is going to look like in the red, white, and blue of the Canadiens. So I don't know if you guys have any specific questions about Laine, but I thought I would kind of start off with just a little bit of insight into Laine as a player, because I see a lot of people that are saying that he is just a one-dimensional goal scorer. He doesn't do anything else. He's not physical. He doesn't defend. He doesn't do anything but score goals. To which I say that's what a lot of people said about Alex Ovechkin. And I'm not comparing these two players necessarily, but I think people really underrate pure goal scorers in this league. I mean, I'm assuming you guys are familiar with that, having watched people talk about Cole Caulfield for the past 2 years. And I kind of think Patrik Laine is in a similar-ish boat, and that's definitely his biggest strength. But Patrik Laine, I think, is kind of an underrated player in terms of he's not a bad transition guy. I don't think he's ever going to be a Selke candidate in terms of like defensive responsibility, but he is far from a liability. He doesn't create a ton of offense, but he definitely finishes it. He doesn't use his size in the corners, but he definitely uses it kind of in the center of the ice. He wins battles there. He's never going to be like a power forward, which is what a lot of people wanted him to be when he first came to Columbus. But he is a guy that, and this is the big thing here, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second. If he can stay healthy and if he can have consistent line mates, two of which he didn't ever really have in Columbus, then sure, this is a guy that could score 30 to 40 goals for you guys this season.
So I think for me, one of the big things that he said yesterday, which is something that I don't necessarily think that he's associated with, is he said he thinks he has playmaking ability, which I thought was interesting because in my mind, I've already penciled him in on the Kirby Dach line. And so he doesn't need to do that, right? He doesn't need to do that. We've got Kirby Dach for that. But an interesting where I would like to, see him sort of what I would like to see from him, is what kinds of situations the Canadiens put him in. Like to me, pure goal scorer, you belong on the power play. Is he going to improve the power play? Because you've seen it, Jay. Like we've talked about it. You've seen the special teams on this team. And the power play is usually it's where hope goes to die. So I'm really hoping that
relatable.
I'm really hoping that this gives them another weapon and you're talking about how he doesn't use his size in the corners, which is really interesting because that's something where somebody of almost equal size in Juraj Slafkovsky, that's where he's really good at using his size, right? So I don't necessarily think he needs to be that on the Montreal Canadiens. I think we've got a player that's really good at that. But I really want to make sure that, he does bring something other than everyone's like, oh, he's just going to finish.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you mentioned Slafkovsky because I do think that might be a really good duo to have. And then you figure out who plays in the middle of that. And whether that's Kirby Dach, whether that's, I think Alex Newhook has kind of been slotted in as the second line center, like whether you put Slafkovsky on the first line or whatever, like that's a really intriguing duo to me because I feel very much like Juraj Slafkovský will start it and Patrik Laine will finish it, whether that is puck possession, whether that is actually a goal, or whether that's just kind of being kind of a pain in the butt on the ice, which I think is also a really underrated part of Laine's game, is that he frustrates guys. Not in an Arbor Jacki kind of way, just in a you think you have him shut down and then oh nope, there he goes. So that I think is a really underrated part of his game. But yeah, definitely power play. I don't know that he will 100% categorically fix the power play, but he definitely won't make it worse. And like that's not nothing for a team that has such a miserable power play, and that's coming from a place of I have also watched a miserable power play for the last million years. Like, he's not going to make it worse. It's going to come down to where he gets used. The Blue Jackets didn't really find success with Laine on the power play because they insisted on playing him and Gaudreau together, two players that had negative chemistry at even strength. And then on the power play, they both like to play the same area, which is kind of the hash marks on the left side. So one of them had to play not there and suffered for it. And they just kept kind of flip-flopping them and, again, changing things around. Consistency is the big thing here for Laine. And I don't pay enough attention to the Habs to know kind of their deal with consistency in terms of line combinations. But that was a big problem that I had with the Blue Jackets, basically since Tortorella left, ironically. And again, Laine didn't ever really have consistent line mates. So if they can like glue him to a guy like Slafkovský and a guy like Kirby Dach, for example, leave him there. He'll figure it out. He is a very, very good second line winger for you guys. Potentially a top line winger.
Yeah, that's where he kind of slots in, right? Is on that line with Kirby Dach and potentially Alex Newhook on the other side. The one thing, you mentioned, cannibalizing each other's spots, right? Like only one guy can be in the Ovechkin office, right? Right now, that's Cole Caulfield. What's going to happen there? Are we going to put Laine in the slot to, be the finisher on a bumper play? Do we move Cole Caulfield somewhere else? It's a lot of right-handed shots on the power play. Yeah,
exactly. It gives you depth. Does Patrik Laine play on the second power play unit? And then Cole Caulfield comes off the ice, and then Patrik Laine goes and stands in the exact same spot. And it's like, I thought we just finished with this.
Yeah, we're so used to the top power play unit getting like a minute 45, and then the second unit getting, the scraps.
Yeah.
But
and also getting scored on.
Yeah, for sure. And then that kind of allows guys like Nick Suzuki to be fresher because Suzuki's going to play in all kinds of situations. If you can, limit his power play time, as effective as he is on the power play, it'll probably pay dividends in, the long-term health of not only him, but, this team and their depth at center. So it's exciting to think of a bunch of different places Laine could potentially play on a Canadiens team that is so starved for offense, even with Cole Caulfield. It's a good problem to have, trying to think of where he's going to play.
For sure. And again, like, he's a very expensive second line winger, but if he fits in the cap, and if the Canadiens can kind of have a situation where, I think it's kind of generally agreed Nick Suzuki is the 1C on this team. But if you can have a 1A, 1B situation with your top six, like, oh no, we have two really good lines. It's not to compare these players in any way, but it's kind of the quote unquote problem that the Chicago Blackhawks had between like 2008 to 2014 of you've got Jonathan Toews, obviously, as that first line center, and then they had Patrick Kane, on the second line, basically that entire time when they split those two players up. So, oh no, we have good players on two lines, I think is a really great problem to have.
And I think pretty much everyone on that, like I would say, like you've got 5 players that could be 1A, 1B, right? And then Joshua Ross pushing for that. I'm never going to say that Alex Newhook is going to be a 1A. I'm so sorry. I love Alex Newhook, but that's not happening, right? And I get why Kent Hughes traded for him, and I hope he proves me wrong, and I will eat crow on the show. I will. I just feel like, you've got your Slafkovský, you've got your Cole Caulfield, you've got your Nick Suzuki, you've got Patrik Laine, you've got Kirby Dach, like that. Those are 5 players that are all 1A, 1B players.
Right. And the hope is that Demidov comes in and replaces Alex Newhook in that top six, and then Alex Newhook is a great third liner. You know? Yeah, really great problem. Really
Assuming
great problem.
Laine's here when Demidov comes in,
right?
Which there might be a year of overlap,
right?
The kind of the not the worry I have with Laine is I just wanted to kind of touch a little bit on something that I mentioned, I think at the end of the first segment, which is this idea that Laine is going to come in and then immediately hit his full potential, hit his ceiling. He's going to be the player he was in, 2017, 2018, I want to say, when he scored 44 goals on the Jets. Temper your expectations, people. That being said, Patrik Laine is either going to score 5 goals this season or 45 goals this season. And I don't think it's going to be in between those two. So, obviously, one is way more ideal than the other. But I think that's kind of what I come back to with the trade as well, is that people seem to be looking at it as this is a bona fide 40-goal scorer for the Canadiens. This trade is not without risk. The Canadiens, they could very well be paying $8.7 million for someone who's going to spend most of next season on IR, or who's going to spend most of next season up and down the lineup because he can't find consistency, he can't find success, So I'm not saying that Patrik Laine is going to fail in Montreal. I would love him to beat the brakes off of every single one of his critics that says he's too soft and he can't play in this league and, blah, 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 blah. Temper your expectations. That's what we've been doing all summer long on Locked On Blue Jackets, or trying to anyway, is we've been tempering our expectations and not getting overly invested in something. And then if he does score 40 goals, you get to be really excited because you had him penciled in for 25 goals or whatever. But Patrik Laine hasn't scored 40 goals since his second season in the league, hasn't scored 30 goals since his third season in the league, which I believe was 2018-19, if I am doing my math correctly. So
but you're talking to Habs fans here.
Oh, no, I know that I am shouting into the void about this. But I would be remiss if I did not mention that, there is some risk to this. It is a high risk, high reward for the Habs, Whereas I feel like the Blue Jackets got a player, and we'll talk about Harris in a second here. The Blue Jackets got a player that has a way lower ceiling, but I think is way more likely to hit that ceiling than Patrik Laine is to hit the 40 to 50 goal expectations that are already being put on him by
himself.
So many Habs fans.
By himself. He's doing it too. He's had it himself.
100%. And love that. Bet on yourself. Hockey is 98% confidence. If you believe that you're a 50 goal scorer, then you are 98% of the way there. That's going to come back to bite me. I'm going to get old hockey takes exposed with that, but I don't care. Do we have anything else that we want to talk about with Laine, or can we move on to Laura waxing poetic about Jordan Harris?
I think we're ready for Jordan Harris.
Perfect. So we'll take a quick break. When we come back, I've got some questions for you about the newest Blue Jacket, Jordan Harris. That's coming up on this special crossover edition of Locked On Blue Jackets and Locked On Canadiens. First, though, I've got to tell you all about FanDuel, because you've heard us talk about FanDuel a lot. They are America's #1 sportsbook. They are our #1 sportsbook. Well, they've got something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, every single FanDuel customer can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. With a YouTube-based TV plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account, a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So whether you want to pay attention to the Browns or the Bengals, if you are a Chiefs fan and you want to watch them three-peat, you could do all of this with NFL Sunday Ticket, and you can get NFL Sunday Ticket through FanDuel. And why don't you go ahead and place a bet on who you think is going to win the Super Bowl while you are there? Use that $5 for something fun, right? Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and also our #1 sportsbook here at the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets and Locked On Canadiens. Jordan Harris is, by all accounts, a nice young man and a pretty darn good defenseman as well. So let's start there, because this is something I talked about a little bit in my episode yesterday, which is the Blue Jackets. I don't remember the last time the Blue Jackets had a pure defensive defenseman. that was competent at defense. We've had a lot of quote-unquote stay-at-home defensemen that are kind of disasters. But Jordan Harris, every single kind of fan scouting report I've had on him, not flashy, not going to wow you, not going to put up points, does all of the little things right, incredibly smart, and will make everyone else on the ice's lives much, much easier. Would you say that that is kind of an accurate elevator pitch for Harris?
I would absolutely agree with that. So the thing is, like, you're saying like he's not going to dazzle or wow, but if you're used to terrible defense on a team, yes, somebody showing up and doing everything right is going to dazzle or wow you. I really love Jordan Harris for very many reasons. He is, like you said, a nice young man. He's a very thoughtful, intelligent person. He seems like he's got a great character, but he's also somebody where I think, you hear the word defensive defenseman. A lot of times you think of the guy that goes for the hit, misses the play, and the puck ends up in your net. There's a lot of negative connotation to that. And he's the exact opposite of that. He's not offensive. He is a defensive defenseman where he's actually keeping the puck out of the net and out of the zone. And there's something extremely calm about the way that he does it. He's very unflappable. He knows where to be. Like, his positioning is incredible. I find that he's never chasing the play. He's anticipating the play. And that, to me, like, what you're looking for in a guy like Jordan Harris is that's exactly what you need. You need someone who knows where he's supposed to be and who knows what he's supposed to be doing, right? And I know from watching the Montreal Canadiens for the last couple of years, this is a problem in this defense, and he seems to be one of the few people who doesn't have it. And so I know, like, he's there. He's even making up for the coaching shortcomings of this team, right? Like the defensive coaching shortcomings. So for me, like, anytime he's on the ice, it feels like safety. Like he provides a sense of security to the others. And I think like he does it without making any noise. He simply, you watch him and you're like, wow, he took care of business. And I love that about him. And I think what I'm going to miss is that I'm going to miss the fact that he makes it look so easy, and that there's like at least one defenseman that doesn't give us fits every time we're watching a game.
Yeah, that's kind of the dream. Is it fair to say that he's one of those defensemen that you only notice, that you don't notice?
Yeah.
Because I feel like a lot of defensemen you only notice when things go wrong.
Yes.
And it gets to the end of the game, you're like, wow, I didn't see Harris at all. And then you look at the stats and you're like, oh, he killed it.
Yeah, he did. And that's exactly how it works, right? And so a lot of people were like, this guy's a waste of space on the team. And then you look at what he really does provide, and what he provides is so much value. And that's why I'm getting so passionate about this, because like I spent a lot of time being a Jordan Harris truther and defender. But I really love that now, like apparently now that he's gone, all the fans are in your mentions being like, he's great. They finally come around to Jordan Harris. But like, I remember just getting like really frustrated with comments like that, because he's not here to provide, 25 goals. He's literally here to clean up, and he cleans up really, really well.
Yeah, he takes care of the puck, right? Like that's the kind of defenseman he is. His skating is a lot more smooth than I think people give him credit for. Like, one of my favorite things that I remember of him is, in the brief times we got to see him on the power play, is how well he skates across the blue line. Like, it's not an easy thing to do to, glide along the blue line and keep the puck in and keep the forechecker off of you, right? I think he does that extremely well. Jordan Harris was not expendable because of his play. He was expendable because of the roster that the Canadiens constructed. I think that's what the long and short of it, right? Montreal has focused on defensemen. There was like the first year a few years ago where they had like 5 rookie defensemen in the lineup. Like, it's that kind of thing. And it seems like the last few years, every few weeks, we got a new one. Like, someone else would step in. Like, Jaden Struble showed up last year and was a revelation, right? Like, guy who was pretty good in college, didn't look super great in the AHL, stepped into the NHL and kind of looks like he's never going to go back.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
So like it's Jordan Harris was a victim of the numbers game, as so many players are. When I saw that he was the one going, I was immediately kind of disappointed because I like him, but then I was also super excited for him, right? Like, he's going to get an opportunity to get out of the rotation that is the Canadiens defense. I think you guys have a kid that has a really good head on his shoulders. I hope it's not weird to say this, but he's the kind of guy that I think, like, you listen to him speak and you go, your parents are really proud of you, huh? like you're just like, you just dote over him, right? So I think you guys will fall in love with him in short order. And we'll definitely miss him. Harris was a good one.
Yeah, for sure. It feels, and this might be flip of me, but I look at Jordan Harris and I hear him speak, and I'm like, oh, this kid knows how to read, you know, which is not a given for NHL players, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, just the more I hear about him, the more, like, I've watched a bit of his tape of kind of the last season, and I'm like, oh, okay, like, this guy is potential, you know. And do I think that he is a future, like, long-term Blue Jacket? Maybe, maybe not. What he does, and again, this is something I talked about on my show yesterday, is he gives the Blue Jackets A, stability on the blue line, and B, also kind of flexibility with the makeup of the blue line. There was a hole that was left by the departures of Adam Boquist and Jake Bean. I think Ivan Provorov is not long for this roster, whether he's a deadline trade or what. He's a UFA at the end of the season. I can't see them keeping him for, you know, whatever reason. So Jordan Harris, in theory, and this is something we talked about a little bit off mic, like, there's a chance that by, like, American Thanksgiving, he is that second pairing left defenseman, which I don't think is a role. I see a lot of people saying that he was, like, the 12th best defenseman on the Habs now, and that's how they had to get rid of him.
Absolutely
and I
not.
don't think it's quite that bad.
Absolutely not.
No,
was he
that's
going
insanity.
to get second pairing minutes in Montreal as a left defenseman? You know,
Exactly.
Yeah, it wasn't going to happen. It's unfortunate because he's really good. Like, it's just one of those things. It's like you look at up and down the left side of that defense. You know, is Mike Matheson going? No. Is Caden Gooley going? No. They're making room for Lane Hudson. Jaden Struble, he probably showed a little bit more than Jordan Harris got an opportunity to. Arbor Xhekaj, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, what do you do? So they made the best of a bad situation, and Jordan Harris's agent said as much. He said Jordan needs to play.
Yeah.
So I think they're appreciative of the move, and that he gets an opportunity to not only play but play a key role on an up and coming team. Yeah.
Where do we're going a little bit long here, so we'll have to finish up in a second. But I wanted to kind of ask one last question. Is I've kind of, and I talked a little bit about kind of he could be playing in that Ivan Provorov role of second line left defense. Is that kind of his ideal spot, is playing defensive defense on the second pairing with, for example, a guy like Damon Severson, who is a fairly competent offensive defenseman, but very often it's almost like his brain shuts down for a second and he just blue screens and does something completely boneheaded and throws the pucks to the opponent. Having someone like Harris as his partner, I think, would cut down on those mistakes, or would have someone that is capable of, like, fixing those mistakes so you don't have to do, like, the Looney Tunes running that sometimes happened when you had, like, a Provorov and Severson pairing last season. Like, is that kind of, am I talking nonsense here, or does that kind of make sense as to Harris's role on this
Not
team?
at all. I think when you're saying, like, you know, that blue screen of death moment happens, Jordan Harris will be there. Like, that's what I think, you know, his ideal, that's where he should be. You know, he's not going to be a top pairing defenseman as much as we love him. Like, his ceiling is second pair, but that's exactly what he's there for. Like, he will know where to be. He will anticipate it, and he will be there. He'll help keep the puck out of the net, out of the zone, away from the opponent.
And quite frankly, that's what the Blue Jackets need. Their offense took strides this past season. They took strides this off season, I think. Obviously, losing Laine, gaining Sean Monahan it's not like a 1-for-1 thing, but you're not getting 40 goals out of Monahan, but I don't think you were getting 40 goals out of Laine in Columbus anyway. So, like, they've probably improved the offense there. Having a healthy Fantilli is going to be great, etc., etc., etc. Now the job becomes, can they keep the puck out of the net for long enough to string together more than 2 wins in a row? Because the Blue Jackets did not win back-to-back games last season. I think they won back-to-back games 3 times last season.
Wow.
It was miserable. They won back-to-back games on Black Friday weekend and then didn't do it again until, like, February. It was awful.
Wow.
It was miserable. I would love for that to not happen this season. But if people want to, I think we're kind of, again, I could talk all day with you guys about Laine, about Harris, about the weather, anything. I love you guys. But if people want to kind of keep up with Laine, they want to get more Laine content, if they want to maybe go back and listen to old episodes about Jordan Harris, for example, where can people find you guys and your show online?
Ian,
you want to take it, Laura? You want me to get it?
Yes,
I'll do
you
it.
take it.
At LO_Canadiens on Twitter. We're on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm at Maybe It's Ian. Laura is at The Active Stick. We will be dream posting about Laine probably for the rest of the summer. So
you heard it here first, folks. If you want Laine content, LO_Canadiens is where to go. I've been Jacob Foster. You can find me at _Jacob Foster on Twitter, JAKOBFORSTER. Find the show at LO_Blue Jackets for all the Habs fans that want to keep up with Jordan Harris. And it sounds like there's going to be a lot of them. So welcome on in, guys. It's going to be Jordan Harris posting from here on out. Thank you, everyone, for listening, for making Locked On Blue Jackets or Locked On Canadiens your first listen of the day every single day. We will be back with separate episodes on Friday. Locked On Canadiens, I believe, will have a mailbag episode and also talk about bobbleheads. Is a fun teaser for you guys. And I will probably be talking about what the Blue Jackets offense looks like now that there's confirmed no Patrik Laine. So tune in for those episodes. Until then, thank you once again for listening, and make sure you stay locked on.